Seems that 2020 has been a year of perpetual crisis, just one crisis after another, whether it's business related or social or political in an election year. It just seems like we've been in a constant state of crisis all year. And so, one of the questions that we like to ask is what type of leader, who do we turn to help us successfully emerge from a crisis? And so my name is Wilbur Reid, and in this presentation, I'm going to combine my passion for business and leadership and faith and data analytics to look at this question of who do we turn to and are they successful in helping deliver us from crisis. So we love, as Christians, we love that appeal of service and humility and leadership, but we need some empirical data. Does it work in reality? So, as we think about service and humility and leadership, we've got to start with Robert Greenleaf and his seminal book on servant leadership. So, in this book, he says that the servant leader is servant first. And so we strongly appeal to this idea of the servant, and then conscious choice aspires them to become a leader. So one of the things, one of the lesser known quotes from Greenleaf says, ego works in the face of genuine crisis. In other words, he believes that ego is detrimental to getting us out of a crisis situation. And so let's look at some empirical data and see if that's true. To measure this, I've looked at this instrument by Winston and Fields. They looked at the metadata available. There's a lot of research on servant leadership and what is a servant leader and what are the characteristics and behaviors. And so Winston and Fields narrowed it down to 10 behaviors that everyone sort of agrees these are the 10 things that are the most likely things that identify a servant leader. And so we'll use this scale in an instrument to measure the level of servant leadership. And also we want to look at level 5 leadership from Jim Collins' best-selling book, Good to Great. And Collins identified in these good to great leaders that there was this paradoxical blend of personal humility and professional will. And so these good to great leaders were personally humble individuals, but they had a passion for the business. And so there's not been a lot of academic research on this because Collins never told how to measure servant leadership. He just described it. And so in one of my previous research endeavors, I developed a validated scale to measure level 5 leadership. And so identified 5 attributes of personal humility. So a level 5 leader is genuine, humble, team player, servant attitude, doesn't seek the spotlight. And then they have that professional will side, and I actually prefer the term zeal. A lot of people don't quite understand exactly what professional will means exactly, and zeal, I think, is a little better description. So intense resolve, dedication to the organization, a clear catalyst in achieving results, strong work ethic, and self-motivated. And another way that Collins described this idea of level 5 leaders, he says they have an absolute, obsessed, burning, compulsive ambition that's not about you. It's about the cause, the organization, or the company. And so they combine this passion with humility for the success of the organization. So we want to look at both of the servant leader and the level 5 leader and see how that correlates to success in crisis. So if we look at level 5 leaders and we look at this humility and zeal and put it on a 2x2 grid, we can look here at leaders that are high in humility but low in zeal or professional will. And so a lot of our servant leaders fall into this category. So they are servants and they are happy to help, but they don't have that ambition, that passion that drives them to be successful. And so they're more complacent leaders. And then you have the leaders that are high in humility and high in zeal. And these are the level 5 leaders. These are the ones we're really interested in looking at to find out if these leaders are successful. So they are humble, but they are passionate. And then you have low humility and low zeal. So these are laid back characters that have some ego to them. And so I've categorized them as delusional. They're no help whatsoever. And then you have high zeal, but low humility. So these we could call impassioned narcissists. And so Collins described Lee Iacocca, for example, in this regard. You know, he was a passionate, successful guy, but a lot of ego to go with it. If he were describing leaders today, probably the one that would pop to everybody's mind might be Donald Trump. You know, he's successful, but not humility is not one of the attributes that would be used to describe his leadership. And so really what we're going for here are these level 5 leaders. We want to identify, are they different than other leaders in a time of crisis? So servant leadership and level 5 leadership are unique, are similar in a lot of ways, but they're also unique in some ways. And I think one of the primary differences is the focus of the leader. So a servant leader is focused on serving their followers, and the organizational objectives are subordinate. So I'm going to serve my followers, and if the organization benefits from that, that's great, but that's not my primary purpose. And then level 5 leaders are in service to the organization or the cause, not their followers. So if the organization or the cause is successful, that's the purpose. And if my followers are also happy and satisfied, then that's great too. But that's not the objective. And so in reality, what happens is most of the time, these are the same people. So, you know, if you have subjugated your ego and you are humbly serving the organization and probably also your followers, then you're going to be both a servant leader and a level 5 leader. But they're not necessarily the same. There can be some differences there where, you know, you've got somebody that'll serve the followers and don't care at all about the organization. And likewise, they're sold out to the organization and really don't care if the followers benefit at all. So both of those can happen, but usually they're the same people. So the research methodology for this particular project, the study itself, my objective was identify the leaders that people turn to in crisis and then ascertain the type and effectiveness of that leadership. And so the questions that were asked in the survey, they were asked to identify the person that they turn to in a specific time of crisis, and then evaluate the effectiveness of those leaders during the time of crisis, and then assess the servant leadership and level 5 leadership behaviors exhibited by the leaders. And so this is what we asked the participants of this survey to answer for us. And the research questions that we're going for here: is there a statistically significant relationship between the rank of the leader and the success? And I'll show you a bit more of that in a second. Is there a statistically significant relationship between leader success in crisis times and servant leadership, and likewise in level 5 leadership? So those were the 3 primary questions we're trying to answer in this research. So the question regarding the rank of the leader, it says, think of a turbulent time or a time of crisis at work. Who was the person that took the lead in trying to pull the organization out of crisis? And so the choices we have: the CEO or the highest ranking leader. So, you know, it could be in a nonprofit organization, it could be the executive director, for example. So the highest ranking leader, another senior executive, so an executive vice president, some other high ranking executive. It could be a middle manager, or it could be a person with no formal authority. Somebody that just, you know, fills that leadership role and doesn't really have the title, but is influential among the people. So then the dependent variable then was success, and the question was, how successful was this person in leading the organization out of crisis? So either they had great success, moderate success, or little or no success. And so the data model then shows the dependent variable that we're looking at is the success of the leader. So we have ordinal values there, 1 to 3, that we just reviewed. The rank of the leader that we looked at. So again, an ordinal number there. Servant leadership is a scale of 1 to 5. Again, using that 10-item scale from Winston and Fields. And then the level 5 leadership, And level 5 is dichotomous. The way Collins described it, you're either a level 5 leader or you're not a level 5 leader. So it's either yes or no on the level 5. So the results of the survey came back, and we had 300 participants in it. If we look at the gender, female to male, about 57% to 43%. There, 172 out of 300 were female. And then we look at the ages, and so we had a pretty good distribution there. Leans a little toward the older side, which is good. We've got people with more experience responding here, so a little older skewed there. And then let's look at the results. So question number 1 was, is there a statistically significant relationship between the rank of the leader and success in crisis? And as we look at the averages, the average score, the CEO got a score, again, out of 3. So it is either a 1, 2, or a 3. So the CEO is ranked 2.45 out of 3 on being successful in getting the organization out of trouble. Another senior executive a little bit lower, and then middle managers and a person with no rank, not as effective, moderate success generally. The p-value shows statistically significant, and I won't get into all the statistics here. If you're interested in the statistics behind this, I'll be happy to share the paper, the full paper that goes along with this, but this is just give you an overview of what we found. But anyway, so the more senior ranking the leader, the more likely they were going to have success, which makes sense because they have more authority, more pull in the organization, and so that makes sense that the higher rank would be more successful. However, when we look at the pseudo R-squared, so we're looking at what percent of the model is explained by this variable. It's only 2 to 4.6% is explained by rank. So as we're going to see in a minute, that's relatively small compared to the leadership type. And so question number 2 was, is there a statistically significant relationship between leader success in crisis and servant leadership? And so what we found is that the servant leadership score was out of 5. So 5.0 would be the highest level, is a 5-point scale. So 5.0 would be the highest level that you could get. And leaders that had great success in getting the organization out of trouble averaged a 4.3 on that scale. If they had moderate success, they averaged a 3.88 as a servant leader, and limited or no success, a 3.31. P-value shows statistically significant difference there. And so sure enough, the higher the servant leader score, the more likely they were to get the organization out of crisis. And as we look at the pseudo R-squared, we have more significant relationship depending, and of course there's 3 different versions here of a pseudo R-squared, and higher relationship, so up to 19.5% of the model is explained by servant leadership as the variable there. So question number 3, is there a statistically significant relationship between leader success in crisis and level 5 leadership? And so what we found is the leaders that had great success, 99 of them were level 5 leaders. Only 33 were not level 5 leaders. So leaders that had great success were 3 times as likely to be designated as level 5. Moderate success was a little more split there, with not level 5 being higher. And leaders that had limited or no success, only 9 of the leaders that had limited or no success were designated as level 5 leaders. So they were 5 times more likely, if they had little or no success, to not be level 5. So once again, shows level 5 leadership is positively related to getting out of crisis, and again, a higher pseudo R-squared, so up to 21.9% of the variability of this model is explained by level 5 leadership, and it is statistically significant. So if we compare each of these leadership, or these pseudo R-squared, how much of the model is explained by each of these, we can look at the 3 different models of how these are calculated, but all 3 of them have different numbers, but relatively speaking, they're the same directionally. The same. And what we see is rank is relatively small as explaining this model. Servant leadership is much higher. Level 5 leadership is even higher. So level 5 leaders are clearly more successful in getting a organization out of crisis. And so then we can compare this to a previous study that I had done in just regular times. And so we looked at success in just a regular situation, business as usual. And what we found is servant leadership scored higher than level 5 in normal times. But then this model shows that in times of crisis or turbulent times, that level 5 is more effective in getting the organization out of trouble. So the conclusions that we draw from this: one is leader rank is statistically significant in recovering from crisis, but servant and level 5 leadership are more important. So the leader rank can be helpful. A higher ranking leader is going to be more successful, but it doesn't explain as much of the model as the others. Servant level 5 leadership are both positively related to success of leaders. Servant leadership is more effective in stable times, while level 5 leadership is more effective in crisis. So, interesting study. Service and humility in leadership does produce results in crisis. So as we go through these crises, we need to identify who are these leaders that put their own ego aside for the betterment of their followers and for the organization. Thanks for listening. I appreciate your time.